Welcome. This is Anadhufu program. I'm Anwar Kari, your host. And my guest today is Dr. Anteneh Tsegaye. He studied in Germany, his PhD. And other academic situations, he's going to tell us. Many things he's going to tell us today here. We invited him. Stay tuned. Doctor, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm happy for being invited for this particular program.
This program, Anadhufu, an Oromo term to mean warm welcome with wide arms, and we welcomed you that way. Let's begin from your birthplace.
Yeah, I was born in Arsirobe, and I was brought up there, studied and completed high school in Dida Senior Secondary School. And then I moved to Bahardar University.
And elementary also there?
Yes, both in the elementary and the secondary school. At Dida Senior Secondary School, finally. And then I moved to Bahardar for my first degree in pedagogy and English. After completing that, I used to teach at St. Joseph Senior Secondary School.
In Finfini City?
No, here in Adama.
Oh, right, in Adama.
Yeah, for a few years. Then I did my master's in teaching English as a foreign language at Tsegaye University. And right after completing my MA, I started teaching there.
At the university?
Yes,
yeah.
in the Department of Foreign Language and Literature.
All right.
Then after teaching for about 2 years and a half, then I prepared myself for a PhD. And then I stayed in Germany in the University of Justus Liebig Universität Gießen. It is about 60 kilometers far from Frankfurt. Then I completed my PhD in intercultural communication.
For how many years did you stay
It's about 4 years program, but the first 6 months took me working on language, German as a foreign language or Deutsch als Fremdsprache. So that gave me the chance to speak about 4 languages.
And now, okay, you speak of Oromo, you speak Amharic, English, and now Dutch.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And your title, about the intercultural communication.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
This is a very interesting question. I'm really glad to be asked this question because this area of communication is not familiar, especially in our country, but it's quite relevant. What is popular is about multiculturalism. It has its own promises and discontents. And I studied intercultural communication as a main element, and I coined it with what we call interculturalism as post-multiculturalism. And the title is an integrative approach to intercultural communication in higher education context. Higher education is where students from different groups, cultural groups, linguistic groups, appear and join universities. And our universities are diverse. There are a number of conflicts because of various reasons. So I was interested to study what was going on.
Now, what first brought the idea to your mind?
Okay, that's interesting. I think it was in 1998. I mean, in the Ethiopian calendar.
All right.
So I used to teach at Addis Ababa University in the Department of Foreign Language and Literature. I was the Student Affairs Committee. So there were a number of cases that students bring to the committee for various reasons. And some of them blame other teachers, usually teachers from a different ethnic group.
Not because they don't belong to that ethnic group.
Yeah.
They give them this and that.
Exactly. And the other was the way they sit in the classroom. And I used to distribute attendance, and while reading the list of the students, I always find homogeneous groups.
Almost together,
yeah.
The Amhars together, the Tigrayans together, sitting in the classroom.
Exactly. I intentionally give them assignments. I used to teach business writing, also as a writing course that demands working in groups.
All right.
So I intentionally give them the chance to group themselves. They always come up with homogeneous groups. Yeah? All right. And then I worked a mini research on that and then presented at Goethe Institute, where Goethe Institute was the sponsor. This was about democracy and social question, and there were a number of professionals involved, and that helped me as a starting point to seize this particular title and to do my PhD on that.
Then did you influence others to understand this, to create in a harmonious environment in higher learning institutions and even in the country? Because this country is the country of over 80 nations, nationalities, and peoples. And the class composition can also have that kind of situation. Have you recommended this to the government, to institutions, so that things will be solved?
Well, that's also an interesting question. Right, I've completed my PhD. Then I came back to Ethiopia, and I prefer to teach, train, advise PhD and MA candidates so that I can influence the country through advising MA and PhD students. So that a lot of students that completed their MA and PhD working in intercultural communication. So that means I have a number of people who could work with me now. And now for example, at Jimma University, last year I remember we tried to prepare a curriculum for intercultural communication and public diplomacy as a MA program. So my influence is through higher educational institutions. But I feel that it's quite important also to influence the media as well as the government and non-government institutions to work on this, because we are past multiculturalism. Without intercultural communication, it is difficult to cross cultural divides so that people could enjoy the benefit of being able to interact with people from different cultures.
You said you were been working to influence through your candidates.
Yes.
But this time onward, through OBN, through other media outlets, definitely I'm sure you influence. Because there's something important that breaks barriers among people. Diversity, at the same time unity.
Yeah.
And that bond will be strengthened and well linked. But I couldn't view and differentiate the gap between multiculturalism and interculturalism.
Yeah. Okay.
How can we differentiate and understand that?
That's a very interesting point. I mean, multiculturalism has its own promises and discontents. The promise is diversity. It encourages diversity. But diversity is not an end by itself, but could be a means. And I always say that multiculturalism is the first train station. It's not the terminal train station. So, yes, it's important. Multiculturalism could help us enjoy diversity. But there must be a way by which we can reach to the terminal. And that is what we call intercultural communication. The communication element in multiculturalism is missing. That's why people misunderstand each other. They misunderstood each other. Groups can misunderstood each other. So the element that would help us to reach to the last terminal are one, second, and foreign language learning. In our case, second language learning. Language is the media and the culture is the content. So it's very important that we learn another language. And the second is cultural learning. Without learning the culture of the other group, it's very difficult to understand the perspective of the other. So these are important tools added to intercultural communication.
Do you have a relationship with anthropology in this case?
Well, this is a multidisciplinary study, and it has its own history. So it involves culture and communication. These two are very difficult terms to define or to come up into conversation. So having these two terms and saying that intercultural communication has various definitions, various arguments, and it is studied from different disciplines. You could find it being studied in journalism and communication. In England, for example, you find it in the Department of Applied Linguistics. In Germany, you could find it, in different other areas. So it is the interest of different groups or different disciplines it has a relationship with most of the disciplines.
In this case, last time when the Dambidolo University was inaugurated, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, called on students of that university to learn language and culture of that environment. Does that go with your idea?
Yeah, it does. It does. One of my recommendations is whenever the students join a university, they should not join it simply for the sake of the input sessions. They should live with the community. So when they are learning the local language, they are adding additional benefit to their life. So learning a different language has a number of imperatives. For example, economic, social, political, a number of benefits that they can get out of that. So without integrating with the community, they can't enjoy life. Yeah? Whether it's academic life or the whole life around them, it will be better if they are integrated with the local community. So they add one more, just like the example that I can give you an example. I speak German, so that's a value added to my education.
Besides your PhD?
Yes.
You get another value, learning the language. Through that language, you learn their culture.
Yeah. For example, every year, the Goethe Institute invites me to train people that go to Germany for different purposes, especially for doing their PhD and MA. I give them intercultural communication trainings, as well as tips about life in Germany. So his point is quite important.
I'm unlucky that I cannot speak German. I only know Guten Tag, Guten Morgen, and Dankeschön. I know that, and I hope I will learn that. And the other thing I want to raise here is, do you think that the universities in Ethiopia, like he said, according to your research, would have that situation of breaking the barrier of homogeneity in classrooms? Like you told me, the groupings, always people, students don't want to intermingle together, don't want to mix themselves together, because the Tigrayans sit only with the Tigrayans, the Oromos sit only among their fellow men. But these are brothers. Why don't they mix together and sit together? The first thing that geared you up to conduct this research, after this time on waters, do you think that this problem will be solved?
By the way, this is not unique to Ethiopia. It's everywhere. The Erasmus program also suffers from this kind of problems.
What does that mean?
The Erasmus program is where there is what they call semester in Ausland, a semester in another country. So they try to build the sense of European Union while they are keeping their own national identities. So through language teaching, through cultural training, and through different events, they try to encourage them to work together to try to help all nationals studying in universities to mix and interact. So it is possible in our case as well. I recommended a number of things to be done on my PhD. The first is, for example, teaching second language. See, if people learn the language, there is a possibility by which they can interact. They could learn a common language. And the other is cultural activities. But the problem that we have is in different universities there are cultural activities, but they are mono-cultural activities. The Oromo cultural activity today, tomorrow perhaps for Amhara, and the other day for another group. Rather, there should be a heterogeneous activities that would help them learn from one another. And there are, maybe to mention, students, while they join to universities, their life should be, the academic life should not be detached from the community. So they should integrate with the community. So different activities can be designed. So through a number of activities, I'm quite sure that people can integrate.
Do you think the celebration of Nations, Nationalities and People's Day would support your idea?
Well, it is good to celebrate Nations and Nationalists Day, but it's a day in a year, yeah? And the focus is only on the dancing and on the clothing. But I think cultural groups, they go beyond these surface manifestations like the artifacts of culture. Rather, we should teach the cultural values. That is what we call the iceberg perspective. So you see only what is the tip of the iceberg. But culture hides more than it tells.
Depth is there.
Exactly. That element should be addressed. It's not bad, it's good to celebrate the day, but I think teaching the cultural values should outweigh simply dancing and having better clothes like that.
Well, dear viewers, I'm sure we have had a good time. Like I've had. Dr. Anteneh Tsegaye told us a lot of things, but this is not the last thing that we stop today. Absolutely, I promise I'll discuss a lot in depth with this intercultural communication, his area of study that can influence even the country to create harmonious and peaceful country than it was ever before. Thank you for watching. Have a good time.
Kabajamoo hordoftoota keenya